Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Chatcast. You're tuning in to Episode 9 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. Welcome back, everyone. We're so incredibly happy to be here with you today for what is going to be a truly transformative discussion.
We're nearing the very end of our first module, the mental shift. If you've been with us since Episode 1, you've already done a tremendous amount of heavy lifting. You've destroyed the translation trap. You've learned to think in phrasal blocks. You've labeled your world, and you've embraced the good enough rule.
In our last episode, we talked about using your imagination as a flight simulator to visualize scenarios before they happen. Today, we're taking that concept and adding the secret ingredient that makes it permanent. Today, we're talking about emotional anchoring.
Before we dive deeply into that, we want to ask our listeners for a quick favor. If you're enjoying this 50-episode journey and finding value in the blueprint, please hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel.
It truly helps us reach more English learners around the world, and it ensures you never miss an episode as we move into the upcoming modules. Now, Ben, let's get right into emotional anchoring. What exactly are we talking about here?
To understand emotional anchoring, we have to look at how human memory actually works. In traditional English classes, we're taught to memorize things using mechanical repetition. You stare at a list of vocabulary words, you repeat them over and over, and you hope they stick in your brain.
And usually, they don't stick, or if they do, they vanish the moment you actually need to use them in a real conversation.
Exactly. And the reason they vanish is because traditional studying is incredibly boring. It's a completely emotionless experience. Your brain is a highly efficient machine. It doesn't want to waste valuable energy remembering things that are boring or irrelevant to your survival. It simply deletes them.
But think about the memories in your life that you can recall perfectly. You remember your first kiss. You remember a time you were incredibly terrified, like almost getting into a car accident. You remember moments of intense, explosive laughter with your best friends.
You don't need flashcards to remember those events. You experienced them once, and they're burned into your hard drive forever. Why? Because those events were accompanied by a massive spike in emotion. Emotion is the superglue of human memory. When your brain feels a strong emotion, it essentially takes a permanent photograph of everything happening in that exact moment.
That permanent photograph is what we call an anchor. An emotional anchor is a link between a specific feeling and a specific word, phrase, or physical action. You already have thousands of emotional anchors in your native language.
Yes, you absolutely do. If I say a certain word to you in your native language, it might instantly make you feel nostalgic for your childhood. If I say another word, it might make you feel angry. The word itself is just a sound, but because it's anchored to a deep emotion, it carries power.
The problem for most adult English learners is that their English vocabulary has zero emotional power. Their words are just gray, boring data points stored in a dusty filing cabinet in their mind. When they try to speak, they're just retrieving data.
And retrieving data is slow. It feels robotic. But when you speak your native language, you aren't retrieving data. You're expressing feelings. The words are alive.
So, the goal of today's episode is to teach you how to bring your English to life. We're going to teach you how to intentionally create emotional anchors for your English vocabulary and, more importantly, for your English speaking state.
Let's start with the negative anchors, because we have to address the elephant in the room. Most English learners actually do have emotional anchors attached to the English language, but they're entirely negative.
This is so profoundly true and so incredibly sad. When many of our listeners open their mouths to speak English, they instantly feel a wave of anxiety, shame, or embarrassment.
Where does that come from? It comes from years of being corrected in classrooms. It comes from taking tests where every mistake was highlighted in bright red ink. It comes from the fear of sounding stupid in front of native speakers.
Every time you felt embarrassed when you mispronounced a word, your brain created a tiny negative anchor. Over the years, those tiny anchors build up into a massive chain that pulls you down every time you try to speak. Your brain now associates the English language with the emotion of fear.
And as we discussed previously, when your brain feels fear, it closes the affective filter. It locks the doors to your vocabulary storage. You freeze.
So before we can build positive anchors, we have to neutralize the negative ones. You have to consciously realize that the anxiety you feel isn't a reflection of your true ability. It's just an old, outdated emotional anchor firing off in your nervous system.
Just recognizing that fact is half the battle. When you feel your heart rate go up before a conversation, you can just tell yourself, "Oh, that's just my old classroom anxiety anchor firing. It isn't real. It's just a ghost from the past."
Once you acknowledge it, you can start overwriting it. You overwrite old negative anchors by intentionally creating new, powerful, positive anchors. This brings us to the practical application. How do we actually build a positive emotional anchor for English fluency?
Building an anchor requires 3 specific elements. First, you need an intense emotional state. Second, you need a specific trigger, which is usually a physical action. And third, you need repetition at the exact peak of the emotion.
Let's walk through a real-time exercise to show our listeners exactly how this works. I want everyone listening, whether you're driving, cooking, or sitting at your desk, to think of a memory in your life where you felt absolutely unstoppable.
Yes, think of a moment of pure confidence. Maybe it was a time you solved a massive problem at work and everyone congratulated you. Maybe it was a time you won a sports competition. Maybe it was the day you graduated from university.
Close your eyes and put yourself back in that exact moment. See what you saw, hear what you heard. Don't just think about the memory logically. You have to actually feel the pride, the strength, and the confidence rising in your chest right now.
Make the feeling bigger. Breathe the way you were breathing in that moment of victory. Stand up straight. Put a massive smile on your face. You're stepping into a peak emotional state.
Now, right as that feeling reaches its absolute maximum level, we're going to set the trigger. I want you to squeeze your right hand into a fist, just tight enough to feel the tension in your muscles.
Hold that fist while you feel the confidence. While you're holding that fist and feeling that incredible pride, I want you to say an English phrasal block out loud with absolute authority. Say, "I speak English effortlessly."
My English is powerful and clear.
Now release your fist and shake out your hands. Take a deep breath and let the feeling fade away. Return to your normal, neutral state.
What you just did was lay the foundation for a positive emotional anchor. You fired a specific physical trigger, which was clenching your fist, at the exact moment your nervous system was flooded with the emotion of confidence. And you tied it to the English language.
Now, if you only do that once, it won't be permanent. But if you do that exact exercise 10 times a day for a week, you're going to wire those neurons together permanently. The physical act of clenching your fist will become a button that instantly turns on your confidence.
That's the magic of emotional anchoring. You're essentially hacking your own nervous system.
Think about how you can use this in the real world. Let's go back to the flight simulator scenario from episode 8. Let's say you're sitting in the waiting room before a huge job interview in English.
Your palms are sweating. Your old negative anxiety anchor is starting to pull you down.
If you don't have a tool to fight back, you're going to walk into that interview room feeling small and terrified. Your English is going to suffer. You're going to forget your phrasal blocks.
But you're a student of the blueprint. You have a tool. While you're sitting in that waiting room, you quietly squeeze your right hand into a fist.
Instantly, because you've done the repetitions at home, your brain recognizes the trigger. Your nervous system remembers the assignment. It releases a rush of that victory emotion. Your shoulders naturally drop. Your breathing slows down. The anxiety is pushed aside by a wave of manufactured confidence.
You walk into the interview room feeling like a champion. Your affective filter is wide open. The words flow out of you smoothly and naturally because you're speaking from a state of emotional power, not a state of fear.
This isn't just a psychological trick. This is neuro-linguistic programming. Professional public speakers do this before they walk out on stage in front of 10,000 people. Elite athletes do this before they take a penalty kick in the World Cup. They have physical triggers anchored to states of absolute focus and confidence.
You can have multiple anchors for different situations, too. The fist clench is great for confidence, but maybe you need an anchor for calmness.
That's a wonderful idea. Sometimes you don't need to feel like a champion. You just need to stop panicking. You can build a calmness anchor.
To build a calmness anchor, you would think of the most relaxing moment of your life. Maybe lying on a warm beach, listening to the waves, or sitting by a fireplace with a cup of tea. You close your eyes. You bring that feeling of deep, warm relaxation into your body, and you set a different physical trigger.
For calmness, a great trigger is simply pressing your thumb and your index finger together gently. As you feel the profound peace of the beach, press those two fingers together and say a calm English phrase out loud. Say, "I have plenty of time," or "The words come to me easily."
Practice that calmness anchor every night before you go to sleep. Wire it deeply into your brain. Then, the next time you're in a loud, chaotic environment, like a noisy restaurant or a fast-paced group conversation, and you feel overwhelmed by the speed of the English around you, just press your thumb and index finger together under the table.
Your brain will instantly access that feeling of the warm beach. The chaos around you will seem to slow down. You'll be able to listen better, process the language faster, and respond without rushing.
We're giving you the remote control to your own emotional state. For too long, English learners have let the environment dictate how they feel. If the native speaker speaks too fast, the learner feels stupid. If the learner forgets a word, they feel embarrassed.
You have to stop being a victim of your environment. When you build emotional anchors, you decide how you're going to feel when you speak English. You take your power back.
Emotional anchoring also applies beautifully to vocabulary acquisition. We touched on this when we talked about mental bridges in episode 6, but it's worth exploring deeper here.
Yes, when you want to learn a difficult new vocabulary word, you must attach an emotion to it. The stronger the emotion, the fewer repetitions you need to memorize it.
Let's say you want to learn the word to scrutinize, which means to examine something very closely and critically. You could just write it on a flashcard and stare at it. It will take you 30 repetitions to remember it, and you'll probably still forget it next week.
Or you can use emotional anchoring. Close your eyes and imagine a completely ridiculous, highly emotional scenario. Imagine you're at the airport. You're running late for your flight. You hand your passport to the security officer. The officer looks at your passport, narrows his eyes, and starts to scrutinize it.
Oh no, the officer is staring at my passport. holding a giant magnifying glass, seems to have examined every single letter of my name. He looks at me, looks back at the passport, scrutinizing the photo. The sweat is forming on my forehead. I can feel it trickling down my temples, and this intense annoyance because I'm gonna miss my flight.
Scrutinize. The officer is scrutinizing my passport.
You've just glued that word to a high-stress emotional state. Because the brain prioritizes emotional memories for survival, you'll likely remember the word scrutinize after just that one single vivid imagination exercise.
The emotion acts as a chemical highlighter pen in your brain. It highlights the word and says, "This is important. Keep this forever."
You can use humor as an emotional anchor as well. Humor is actually one of the most effective anchors for language learning because it naturally lowers the affective filter.
Absolutely. If you can make yourself laugh while you're studying a new phrasal block, you'll lock it in twice as fast. Imagine absurd situations. Imagine a dog wearing a business suit trying to order a coffee. Use your new vocabulary to describe that ridiculous image. The joy and amusement will anchor the words directly into your long-term memory.
This is why learning English through television comedies or funny podcasts is often so effective. You're absorbing the language while you're in a state of positive emotion. The language is slipping past your defenses and anchoring itself to your laughter.
But relying on external content to provide the emotion is a passive strategy. The blueprint is all about active architecture. We want you to be the one generating the emotion on demand.
That brings us to a very important concept. The state you learn in is the state you'll recall in.
This is a fundamental rule of psychology called state-dependent memory. If you study your English vocabulary while you're feeling tired, bored, and frustrated at your desk late at night, your brain anchors those words to the feeling of being tired, bored, and frustrated.
So what happens when you try to use those words in a real conversation when you're feeling energetic or anxious? You can't find them. Your brain hid those words in the tired and bored filing cabinet. You don't have access to them because your current emotional state doesn't match the state you learn them in.
This is why it's absolutely critical that you manage your emotional state before you practice your English. Never study when you're miserable.
If you sit down to do your shadowing sprint or your visualization exercises and you feel stressed out from your workday, don't start practicing right away. You'll just anchor your English to your workplace stress.
Instead, take 2 minutes to change your state. Put on your favorite upbeat song, jump up and down, smile until your cheeks hurt, fire your confidence anchor, get your energy up, and flood your system with positivity.
Only when you're in a peak positive state should you begin your English practice. If you learn the language while feeling joyful, confident, and powerful, then joy, confidence, and power will naturally arise when you speak the language in the real world.
You're literally building a joy machine in your mind. Every time you speak English, it should trigger positive feelings, not negative ones. That's the ultimate goal of the mental shift.
So much of what we do in this module is about undoing the damage caused by traditional education. We're teaching you how to unlearn the fear and relearn the joy of communication.
It takes time, and it requires consistent effort. You have to be the guardian of your own mind. You have to catch yourself when you start sliding back into the old habits of self-criticism and anxiety, and immediately use your anchors to pull yourself back to confidence.
Which brings us to your mission for this week. This is one of my favorite homework assignments in the entire Blueprint program.
Your mission for Episode 9 is to build your primary confidence anchor. We want you to engineer your own personal button for instant English bravery.
Here's exactly what you need to do. Sometime today, find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed for 5 minutes. We want you to go through the exact process we described earlier.
First, identify your peak memory. Find that moment in your past where you felt absolutely invincible, proud, and powerful.
Second, step into the memory. Close your eyes, visualize it in the first person, and manufacture that emotion in your physical body right now. Make your heart beat a little faster. Feel the warmth of success.
Third, choose your physical trigger. It could be clenching your fist, touching your ring, pressing your fingers together, or even taking a sharp, deep breath. Choose something subtle that you can do in public without anyone noticing.
Fourth, at the absolute peak of the emotion, fire the trigger and speak an English phrase of power out loud. Say, "I am fluent," or "My voice is clear."
We want you to repeat this process at least 5 times today. Wire it in. Build the connection between the physical trigger, the emotion of confidence, and the English language.
Once you've built your anchor, we want you to come down to the comments section of this episode. Tell us what your physical trigger is and tell us the phrase of power you used. You don't have to share your private memory if you don't want to, but we want to hear about the mechanics of your anchor.
Reading about everyone's unique triggers is going to be fascinating. And by writing it down in the comments, you're making a public commitment to using this tool. You're solidifying your new mindset.
We'll be in the comments reading through your answers and celebrating your new anchors with you. This is a massive step forward in your journey.
It truly is. When you master your emotional state, the actual mechanics of English vocabulary and grammar become incredibly easy to absorb. You've removed the biggest roadblock to fluency.
This concludes Episode 9 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. We've covered an incredible amount of psychological ground today.
You're doing phenomenal work. You're just 1 episode away from completing Module 1.
In our next episode, Episode 10, we're going to do a comprehensive summary of everything we've learned so far. We're going to tie the translation trap, phrasal blocks, visualization, the good enough rule, and emotional anchoring all together into one cohesive, unstoppable mindset.
It's going to be a powerful review to make sure you have all the tools perfectly sharpened before we move on to the actual physical mechanics of speaking in Module 2.
You won't want to miss it. It's the grand finale of the mental shift.
Until then, keep building your anchors, keep managing your state, and keep bringing joy to your English practice.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Anat. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments about the Chatcast. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
A piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast.